Can you repeat that? I wasn't paying attention.
1 minute, Ms. Rosenthal. Maybe we can try and take some of the conversations away from the chamber.
This act.
Proceed.
Thank you. This bill would amend the multiple dwelling law and the administrative code of New York City in relation to prohibiting advertising that promotes the use of dwelling units in a Class A multiple dwelling for other than permanent residence purposes.
Mr. Corwin,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield?
will you yield, Ms. Rosenthal?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you, Linda. Yes. As you said, this affects just the advertising for the use of these dwellings. It's already outlawed, correct? You're not allowed to use these dwellings for any other purpose than permanent residency, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
In 2010, the legislature passed a law clarifying and strengthening the provision that it is unlawful to rent a Class A multiple dwelling unit for less than 30 days unless the permanent resident is present.
Okay. And so this is affecting just the advertising because really advertising for that use is also illegal, correct?
Exactly.
So we're just imposing fines here?
No, we are clarifying that it is illegal to advertise this illegal use of units, and it imposes penalties, yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming we're doing this because obviously Airbnb has really taken off and we're seeing a huge use of these dwellings for what I call hotel purposes, overnight stays or 2-day stays, correct?
Well, absolutely. The fact that Airbnb barnstormed into this state and others, through its platform, we have lost thousands and thousands of units of affordable housing. There have been many adverse consequences of the Airbnb platform, enabling people and to rent out their units for less than 30 days, changing residential buildings' character, causing safety concerns for permanent residents. There's a panoply of things that we wanted to avoid, which is why we passed the law outlawing this kind of renting. And Airbnb has not cooperated in our attempt to protect our precious affordable housing. They continue to enable the flouting of this important law, and this bill will clarify that if you do engage in such renting out, there will be stiff penalties.
Sure, I understand. I guess I'm just curious here because we outlawed in 2010, you said, and the advertising of such services has been illegal, but yet we still see a proliferation of this usage. Do you believe the penalties are going to make that much of a difference in getting people to not rent out their places?
Well, actually, that is the goal. I've had conversations with Airbnb. I have tried and implored them to let people know what the law in New York State is. I have said, put on your website, here's the law in New York State. Just as I said, it is illegal to rent out units for less than 30 days in Class A multiple dwellings unless the permanent resident is present. And they said, we can't do that. That's not our model. We decline to do that. Said, okay, well, your impact on this city has been tremendous. For people who want to rent out a room in their unit while they're there, go ahead. That's fine. That's legal. No one contests that. If you live in a 1 and 2 family home, go ahead. Do that. But if you live in, let's say, a 300-unit apartment building, and you decide that you want to go away for 3 weeks, and you want someone who you don't know, who they find you on the Airbnb platform, they want to live in your unit while you're gone, that is not legal. This bill does not change what has been illegal since 2010 law passed. People need to understand that. This bill just makes it clear that it's illegal to advertise the illegal activity.
Sure, and again, like I said, I know I've seen some of the statistics, and I know my daughters actually use Airbnb all the time whenever they travel out of town, and oftentimes the reason for people doing this is cost. You can get a much better deal going through Airbnb than you can getting a hotel room, especially in a high cost place like New York City. I know San Francisco is the same way.
That's true in some cases, not true in others. But what we do know is nearly half of all hosts are commercial operators who have more than one unit. The commercial operators make thousands of dollars in revenue each month from Airbnb. So that's why the fines are high, so that they actually feel the cost of what they're doing.
Okay.
And, we have commercial operators who've taken hundreds and thousands of units off the market. These are units that should be occupied by permanent residents. Both rent-regulated units have been taken off the market to become illegal hotels, as well as market rate units. What that does is drive up the cost of market rate units because it makes them more scarce. What it does for rent-regulated units is causes whole swaths of communities to be displaced. We're always talking about how the middle class is disappearing, how it's too expensive to live in the city of New York. With Airbnb having invaded the housing stock in the city of New York, they are just doubling, tripling, quadrupling the problem. And the shame of it is they could help. They refuse to because it's all about the money.
Now, as you talked about the rent-controlled properties that utilize these services, but we haven't talked about regular market rate apartments either. As you said, it's very, very expensive to live in New York City, and I would think for many people, when they go to rent a dwelling or they buy a dwelling in New York City, it's very expensive, and being able to rent out their place on a short-term basis actually helps defray those costs. I know many people who use Airbnb tend to be young people, millennials, who have a very difficult time affording any kind of dwelling. So I guess my concern here is that we're taking away from somebody the opportunity to defray some of their costs.
Well, that's not true because the law has been clear since both houses passed it in 2010 and the governor signed it. It is not legal, and it has not been legal for many years to rent out a unit for less than 30 days unless the permanent resident is there. People need to know that is currently the law in New York State. Airbnb knows it, won't notify the people who use their platform, but what we're concerned with here is the host who has many, many units. And, some months ago I did a sting whereby I rented 4 different units online through Airbnb. Not one of those was from a single renter, someone like me who rents an apartment. These were homes that were laid out like apartments, where they were in apartment buildings. So there was a living room, a bathroom, a kitchen, a bedroom, another room. No personal belongings, no food in the fridge, no toiletries in the bathroom, magazines about what to tour in New York, hints on how to get around the city, subway maps. But this was supposed to be, and once upon a time was, somebody's apartment.
So wouldn't it make more sense then to do a bill that would clamp down or create some sort of enforcement actions on commercial users, people who are abusing the law, as opposed to trying to go after the advertising? I just don't see how going after the advertising is going to change anything.
The way that people find out about available units is through platforms like Airbnb. So the hosts advertise on these platforms. That's how we go after those who have more than one unit and who are illegally renting out units. I can't say it enough. It's illegal. We're not making anything.
I understand that. Like I said, I'm just trying to get to the effectiveness of the legislation. What are we going to do that's actually going to solve the problem? If we just make it more a larger fine for advertising, which we already outlaw the advertising, we're not really changing anything?
Well, actually, we are. This bill, once it's signed into law, will cause a lot of awareness about what actually is the problem with some of the rentals on Airbnb.
But we've already decided that for the major abuses that are happening are among commercial commercial owners who are turning them into
You know
hotel
what?
rooms.
This provides another tool for law enforcement to go after those who illegally rent out units, because it's right there. It's right there on the website. You can see it. They advertise it. You can go after it in that way.
Well, thank you, Linda. I appreciate your comments. On the bill, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Mr. Corwin.
Certainly, I understand the law is pretty clear. We made it very clear back in 2010 as far as what is legal and what isn't with these dwellings. But I can't help but just go back to the fact that even though it's been illegal and advertising these spaces has been illegal as well, that we still have a huge number of people utilizing Airbnb. And certainly you can see the reasons for it. Hotel rooms are very expensive in New York City. Most people can't afford to get a decent hotel when they travel. It's a way of helping people to defray the costs. If you have an apartment and you're paying a lot to have it on a monthly basis and you have to travel for work or whatever, it's nice to be able to allow opportunities to kind of defray the costs. It kind of reminds me, this whole thing, about when I was in my family business. We were in the telephone directory business years ago, the Yellow Pages. And everyone used the Yellow Pages. Everyone had one on their desk. It was a very common product. And then all of a sudden, Yahoo and Google came along, and people found a better way to search for things other than the telephone directory. And so within 2 years of that, the business was wiped out. And it didn't matter how much we lowered the price, no matter how much we gave away the directories to people to encourage their usage. It wasn't a product that suited the needs of people, so they just stopped using it. It's kind of the same thing here. Hotel rooms have gotten so expensive, especially for younger people who already can't afford their own places, who have student debt, their wages are not where they should be. They're financially pinched, unlike any other generation before them. And so this is an alternative way for them to travel, and it's also an alternative way to defray some costs with their space. So as much as we're trying to control this, I don't know if controlling the advertising or trying to put penalties on the advertising is going to do it. I think a much more effective way to do it would be to clamp down on those who are abusing the law, as the sponsor noted, these commercial operations who are basically turning them into hotel rooms. Certainly we can beef up more in terms of enforcement, and I think that's a more effective way to go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Graff.
Will the sponsor yield?
Will you yield, Ms.
Yes.
Rosenthal? Ms. Rosenthal yields.
Thank you, Linda. Now, you just said that the person that's doing the advertising in these cases are Airbnb, correct? They're the
No,
ones actually advertising?
Airbnb is providing the platform for the advertising.
Right. Well, the renters are contracting with Airbnb, correct? To basically get their members to rent their apartments, correct?
Sorry, they're not creating a contract.
Excuse me?
They are not creating a contract with Airbnb,
Well,
are they?
I mean, you just can't go on to Airbnb and put your apartment up. You can't go on to Airbnb to rent an apartment. Don't you have to give them a credit card, Airbnb, in order to rent that apartment?
Not to advertise.
Well,
To engage in the transaction, you have to, but not to advertise.
all right, let's try this one. I have an apartment for rent, all right?
I can't.
I have an apartment for rent.
Okay.
Let's try it a different way.
Well, go ahead.
I'm going to rent out that apartment. I use a real estate broker, okay? Basically what I'm doing is I am contracting with the real estate company to rent out my apartment. You'd agree with that?
If that's what you're doing, yes. Then
Okay.
That's fine.
And in this case, Airbnb is acting almost like a real estate, because what's happening are the people have an apartment that they want to rent for under a month. They're reaching out to Airbnb, and Airbnb is advertising it on their site, right?
You know, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a real estate agent who will help you rent out your unit illegally.
Well, no, I'm just using an analogy here. When I have to rent out an apartment, I'm just renting an apartment out, especially in the city of New York, right? I tell a real estate that I'm renting out an apartment. I engage their services. They usually charge me one month's rent. So the person that's renting gets charged 1 month's rent that goes to the real estate. That's how it works in New York City. Right?
What's the question about the bill?
So the analogy is the same. So now these people are engaged in Airbnb for the same service as a real estate. Now the real estate is the one that advertises. Airbnb is the one that advertises. So would the fine be directed at Airbnb here?
No, I mean, your example has problems, but the way this works is only the guest pays when they rent the room or the apartment. The host does not pay.
Well, who's actually doing the advertising? Who gets fined here? Because we
The
went
host
through
gets fined.
the host.
Yes.
So that's Airbnb.
No, the host is the person offering for rent their unit.
Well, is that explicit in the bill? Because we asked this in codes, and it's unclear whether it was the person that owned the apartment or Airbnb who would be fined.
Well, let me explain it to you. It is the host. It is the person advertising. Airbnb is protected by the Communications Decency Act, and that gives them federal immunity for liability for service providers from content generated by third-party user of the service, which is the host.
Okay. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just contracting a service. They're not actually writing the ad. Airbnb is writing the ad, right?
No, that's not right.
Okay. Well, let's try another way here. Law enforcement, you said, is the one that is going to be regulating this.
It's actually the mayor in New York City. It's the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement, which was created to combat these kinds of illegal rentals. Across the state, it would be, the appropriate agency that enforces multiple dwelling law.
Well, you said before law enforcement when you were debating my colleague.
You know what? I misspoke. It could wind up in law enforcement if there are other charges pressed, but what I should have said is in New York City, it's the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement.
And do they issue a summons to the person?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And where's that summons returnable to?
It's an agency within the city.
And where's it returnable to outside the city?
That's up to the agency that enforces the multiple dwelling law. It's different in different portions of the state.
Okay. And this is like a 3-family home or a 4-family home or
No,
a 5-family
as I
home?
said earlier, 1- and 2-family homes are expressly exempted from this law.
3 to 6?
3 to 6 would be included in the multiple dwelling law, and Class A is permanent housing. So what you're essentially doing here is renting out illegally units that are meant for permanent residents only, not for tourists.
Okay. And it's not just landlords. It's a person that's a renter.
It is the host. It could be the landlord. It's often commercial operators who take many units off the market. As I said earlier, when one of the 4 rentals that I made over Airbnb was a commercial operator who had hundreds of units at his disposal to offer for rent. These are units that were designed and built as apartments for permanent residents, not as hotel rooms.
Okay, so I have, say, a 3-family house. I'd fall under this. Now, in my 3-family house, I have all family members.
Right.
So if my family member, say the senior citizen or the grandparent in the home who's a snowbird
Your home.
and goes down to Florida and back up here, and if she was to use this service, which is a family-owned, family-occupied building, okay, and if grandma puts her...
You know what? If it's let me explain this to you. If it's occupied by family, then it's not illegal.
Well, if I have a three-family that used to be rent controlled, but now my whole family lives there,
Well, that doesn't really exist.
it doesn't. Okay. But if I have a snowbird, a senior citizen, who has a very low income, and she uses this service to be able to help subsidize her rent, subsidize her food, subsidize her medicine, and she decides to use this service, she would fall under this and be fined if
I
she's
mean-
in that apartment.
The example you provide that a poor senior citizen would most likely remain in her unit and just get somebody in there while she's present, and that's perfectly legal.
Well, okay. If she goes out and visits with family and she does this, she'd be fined. If she tried to generate income,
You know,
By
you
doing
can ask this a million ways. The 2010 law is very clear. If you want to use Airbnb as a platform and rent out part of your apartment while you are present, be my guest. That's perfectly legal.
okay. So let me get this. But a two-family home in the same situation, that tenant under this legislation would be able to rent that or use Airbnb?
Can you just repeat that?
So if I have a two-family home,
Yeah.
same thing, I have a renter,
Yes.
right? And it's under rent control. If it's under rent control, or she does this,
A two-family house is not a multiple dwelling. You can do that.
yeah, a two-family house is a multiple
No,
dwelling.
well-
It's two families.
Not under the law, maybe in the dictionary.
Okay. But a person in a two-family house
Yes.
would be able to use Airbnb
Yes, absolutely.
without the consent of the owner?
As I said, one and two family houses are not covered under the 2010 law. So if you have a two family house, do with it what you will.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Mr. Murray.
Mr. Speaker, would the sponsor yield?
Ms. Rosenthal, will you yield?
Yes, I will.
Ms. Rosenthal yields.
Hi, Linda. Just one quick question. I just want clarification on the penalties and the fines. I just want to clarify that it's not the advertising medium, meaning whether it's a magazine or a TV station or a radio station, they're not the ones that will be held responsible or fined.
No, it's the host.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Glick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Briefly on the bill, for those of you who are in other parts of the state where it has not dramatically impacted your constituents, I can understand why you're confused. But for people who live in a building, when you have transient people coming in and out of the building where you live, where your kids are in the hallway coming in and out, having people who you have no idea who they are, having the keys to the front of the building is a danger. It is a problem if you have people they're on vacation, so they're partying, so there's noise. You live in an apartment building. You don't live in a hotel where you can call downstairs to the desk and say that the folks in room 2030 are making a terrible racket. Could somebody do something? You have to call the police. So the cost to the city of New York is that they may have to send somebody to deal with disruptive vacationers who have no business being in your apartment building down the hall from you. We have had numerous small hotels spring up all over my district. They employ people. They pay taxes. Many of you have carried legislation that increases the motel and hotel taxes in your counties so that your counties can get that revenue. Airbnb completely circumvents that. So we're not getting the revenue. They may, in fact, be costing us on services. They are certainly not employing people. They have a contract with somebody who might come in and clean the place up. But the bottom line is these are apartments that should be permanent residences for New Yorkers. That is the bottom line. The activity is illegal. This bill simply says you can't advertise an illegal activity. I don't know what the big confusion is. It's an illegal activity, and we're not going to allow people. The Office of Special Enforcement by the mayor, if they have a complaint that they have to go to the apartment, knock on the door, and see if somebody's there. So this is a tool for them not to have to dispatch somebody. There may or may not be anybody there, so they might have to send an inspector several times. It's a waste of resources. This is a way, another tool in the toolbox for special enforcement to identify people who are engaged in an illegal operation. An illegal operation that has many negative impacts for us: loss of revenue, insufficient job creation, displacing New Yorkers, inconveniencing or putting New Yorkers in danger or discomfort in terms of they pay a pretty good rent. But if the landlord decides they can rent out 5 apartments, 1 on each floor, and get 5 times or 6 times the rent, you're losing housing for New Yorkers, and you are creating a nuisance for the people who are paying their rent. So we're trying to use another way of getting at an illegal activity. The bill is a good bill. I would urge everybody to vote in favor.
Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize for the interruption, but I'd like to ask members of the Rules Committee to move to the Speaker's Conference Room. Rules in the Speaker's Conference Room.
Rules Committee, Speaker's Conference Room. Mr. Dendecker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to build on the bill.
Bill, sir.
Just to reiterate some other facts that were just mentioned, there's a whole nother real estate industry out there, the licensed real estate industry. And licensed real estate agents do not make money when a site like this is advertising what should be rental apartments, where a real estate agent would be able to show that apartment for rent and make a commission off it. That apartment is taken off the market. It's being used in an illegal activity, and hence there's less business for licensed real estate agents. And also licensed real estate agents are not allowed under law to show any apartment or rent any apartment as part of an illegal activity. So if they did so, they would be brought up on charges and they'd lose their license. So it is a very important bill that we pass this, also for the licensed realtors that are out there every day consciously doing a good job for not only landlords but also for tenants, and bringing them together and trying to do it in a just and fair way. And sites like this and illegal activity that are promoted takes away from that. So I wish everybody would just keep that in mind, that this is a very good bill for the licensed realtors.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
The clerk will record the vote. Mr. DeLon to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to commend the sponsor on this bill. In a previous life, I had the privilege of chairing the Housing and Buildings Committee within the City of New York, which was the first governmental entity to try to tackle this problem. We found very quickly that we needed state jurisdiction, and thus the measure that made this illegal came before the state legislature and a lot of people here. The reason why we are going after advertising is because it is the most effective way for the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement to go after this problem. Now, the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement, for those that don't know, is a very small unit. It's a unit that borrows its enforcement inspectors from the New York City Department of Buildings. So at any one given time, there may be no more than 10 inspectors on hand to tackle large problems such as this. So if we can target the advertising for these inspectors, it will be a more effective use of their time, because they are also the entity that issues building permits and construction permits for the city of New York, and goes to just check that buildings are just generally safe. So they have a large number of other duties that they have to handle, as well as going after illegal rentals of apartments. Now, I would say with this issue in and of itself, there's a lot of problems and a lot of flaws. Particularly, I have a problem that a tenant who does not have ownership of the unit, they should not be allowed to rent on any basis their apartment to entities like Airbnb, because we've seen instances where this has happened, where the owner had no knowledge and gave no consent to the tenant to rent these units out to Airbnb, and the owner of these large multiple dwellings still got fined, even though they did not give the tenant express consent to engage in this activity. So I think that's something that needs to be cleared up, but I do believe that the sponsor is on the right track, and I vote yes.
Mr. DeLon in the affirmative. Mr. Walter to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To explain my vote, just find this very interesting, coming off of the last bill as well, where we heard some opposition to modernizing over 100-year-old blue laws, and now we're talking about the new economy, Airbnb. We've seen the opposition to other things like Uber, ride sharing. I just find it ironic that the folks standing in the way of progress, standing in the way of the changes in our economy, are the ones who consider this side of the aisle to be conservative and standing in the way of progress all the time. So just wanted to point that out, the irony in this debate, and I vote in the negative. Thank you.
Mr. Walter in the negative. Ms. Rosenthal to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to explain my vote. Throughout my career so far in the Assembly, it has been my extreme pleasure to try to help out tenants across the state as best as I can. And this bill here is one that protects tenants and affordable housing. This law of 2010 was crafted in part to ensure that all guests, all tourists, stay in buildings that comply with fire, building, safety codes relative to their class. That is what a hotel is. It complies with all of these many safety codes. Apartment buildings, Class A multiple dwellings, have different rules and different regulations because they're meant for people who live there permanently. Now, what I have seen up and down my district is tenants who have to live with a continually changing cast of tourists. Now, tourists do not respect the property of a residential building the way the permanent residents do. So they are free to make noise. They are free to use all the washing machines because they're there that night and want to wash their laundry. They fill up the elevators. They alter the daily life of permanent residents. We are catering more to tourists when we allow this behavior than the people who are the backbone of the city of New York, and we cannot let that continue. We are also losing thousands of units of affordable housing as the administration tries to produce more housing, and they have said 20,000 have been produced. Do you know how many we lose every day when operators take tenants' units off the market? And Airbnb, they cannot just come in here and take over all the housing stock in this city without paying attention to the rules and the laws of this state. I know they're all about their bottom line and pretending that people need their service. There are plenty of legal ways to make more money by staying in your unit while
Rosenthal.
you rent out a room. Airbnb should be ashamed that they put their bottom line.
Ms. Rosenthal, how do you vote?
Let me just finish the sentence. They put their bottom line ahead of communities, tenants, affordable housing, and the law.